We all knew something was wrong when the stream turned clear. The stream had always been muddy, its water brown like the earth it ran through. It had always been this way. It wasn't pretty, but it was ours. We fetched water from it, washed our clothes there, even sat by its banks when we needed to think. But that morning, the water was clear as glass. You could see the stones at the bottom, smooth and shiny. It was beautiful, but it wasn't right. At first, we thought it was a blessing. People laughed and said, maybe the spirits finally got tired of us drinking muddy water. Old Mama Abina, who had the loudest voice in the village, said it was a gift, a sign that we were doing something good. Clean water brings joy, she said, smiling wide. She wasn't wrong. The first few days, it did bring joy. The water tasted better than it ever had. Children played by the stream more often, splashing and giggling. Fishermen said the fish were easier to catch now that they could see them clearly. It felt like a new life. But then the strange things started happening. Kofi, the tailor, who never drank anything but water from the stream, started laughing non-stop. At first, it was funny. He laughed at jokes, at birds flying by, even at his own stubbed toe. But then, he couldn't stop. He laughed until his voice cracked and his eyes turned red. His wife begged him to drink something else, but he only laughed harder. Next, it was Oma, the school teacher. She started dancing in the middle of her lessons. At first, the children clapped and joined her, thinking it was a game. But Oma didn't stop. She danced in the market, she danced at home, she even danced at night, twirling alone under the moon until her feet bled. One by one, the stream changed us. It wasn't the kind of joy we wanted anymore. It was wild, uncontrollable. Some people laughed until they passed out. Others danced until they couldn't stand. Even those who avoided the water weren't safe. The air around the stream seemed to carry it. The village elders called a meeting. We sat under the big baobab tree, listening to them whisper about curses and spirits. Old Mama Abina, the one who had called the stream a gift, sat silently, her hands trembling. No one knew what to do. Days passed, and the village grew quiet, not because we found peace, but because we were too tired to laugh or dance anymore. People stayed away from the stream, but it didn't help. The clear water had already touched us. We started to wonder if it was always meant to end this way. Maybe the stream wasn't cursed. Maybe it was just showing us something we didn't want to see, that joy, too much of it, could break you. In the end, the stream stayed clear even when the village emptied. Some of us left, searching for muddy waters to call home again. Others stayed, sitting by the clear stream, waiting for it to turn back to what it used to be. It never did. We all knew something was wrong when the stream turned clear. The stream had always been muddy, its water brown like the earth it ran through. It had never been clean, but it had always been enough. We fetched water from it, washed our clothes there, and cooled our feet in it after long days in the fields. Sometimes the children would splash around in it, their laughter mixing with the gurgling sound of the stream. It wasn't pretty, but it was ours. Then one morning, we saw the water was clear. Not just clean, clear, like glass. You could see every pebble at the bottom, the way the sunlight bounced off them. It sparkled. At first, we thought it was a miracle. Maybe the spirits have blessed us, Kwako the fisherman said as he leaned over the bank, staring at the shimmering water. Old Mama Abina, who always had the loudest opinions, was beaming. It's a sign, she declared. A gift from the gods for our hard work and prayers. She clapped her hands, and the others nodded, murmuring agreement. We didn't question it. Why would we? Clean water was a blessing we had dreamed of for years. People laughed and cheered, saying it was time we left the muddy past behind. That night, we held a celebration by the stream. Drums echoed through the village, and the air was filled with the smell of roasted yam and the sound of laughter. The next few days were filled with joy. The water tasted fresh and crisp. The children spent their afternoons splashing in the stream, their giggles ringing through the air. Fishermen like Kwaku were catching more fish than they could carry home. Some said the fish were almost throwing themselves into the nets. But then the strange things began to happen. It started small. Kofi, the tailor, began laughing one afternoon. He was sitting under the neem tree, stitching a shirt, when he suddenly burst out laughing. It wasn't the kind of laugh that fades after a moment. It was loud, full, and endless. At first, we thought he'd had a good joke, and some of us laughed along with him. But he didn't stop. By evening, Kofi was still laughing. His face was red, his voice hoarse. "Kofi, stop," his wife pleaded, but he couldn't. He laughed through the night, his body shaking, until he collapsed from exhaustion the next morning. We were still trying to make sense of Kofi's laughter when Oma, the school teacher, began to change. She was in the middle of her lesson when she started humming a tune. The children smiled and hummed along, thinking it was part of the lesson. But then Oma stood up and began to dance. She twirled between the desks, her arms swinging, her feet stomping to a rhythm only she could hear. At first, it seemed harmless, even fun. But Oma didn't stop. She danced through the market, through her home, even in her sleep. At night, you could hear the sound of her bare feet shuffling against the dirt. Her family begged her to stop, but she couldn't. Her feet grew blistered and bloody, but she danced on. The changes spread like wildfire. One by one, the people of our village began acting strangely. Some couldn't stop laughing. Others couldn't stop singing or dancing. Even those who hadn't drunk from the stream began to feel it, as though the air itself was laced with something strange and uncontrollable. At first, it was all joy, but then it became too much. People laughed until their voices cracked. They danced until their bodies gave out. The joy that had once brought us together now felt like it was tearing us apart. The village elders called a meeting under the big baobab tree. There was tension in the air as we gathered, the silence broken only by the occasional burst of uncontrollable laughter or the distant sound of someone humming a tune. "This is not a blessing," one of the elders said, his voice heavy. "It's a curse. The stream has been poisoned by something we do not understand." Old Mama Abina, who had been so full of pride when the water turned clear, sat quietly in the corner. Her hands shook as she stared at the ground. "We must leave," another elder said. "We cannot stay here. The stream has changed, and it has changed us. If we do not go, we may not survive." But where could we go? The stream was the heart of our village. It had given us life for generations. To leave it felt like leaving behind a piece of ourselves. Some people stayed, convinced that the stream would return to its muddy, familiar self. They thought if they just avoided the water, things would go back to normal. Others packed their belongings and left, searching for new homes, for new streams that wouldn't break them. I was one of those who left. I couldn't bear to see my friends and family losing themselves to the joy that the stream had brought. As we walked away, I looked back one last time. The stream still sparkled in the sunlight, clear and beautiful. It hadn't changed back, and I knew it never would. Sometimes, I wonder if the stream was trying to teach us something. That too much joy, just like too much sorrow, can consume you. That even the most beautiful things can have a cost. Now, when I close my eyes, I can still see the clear water, still hear the echoes of laughter and dancing in the village I once called home. We left the stream behind, but I don't think it ever truly left us.